What's going on YouTube? Smaller here, and we are back with another tier list. This time it's going to be a little bit different. I don't know why. I was just thinking about it. I had a different tier list in mind that I was going to make a video for, so I'll be doing that later. But I wanted to do one that I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable in, one that I've at least experienced pretty much everything in. So I want to rank all of the video game consoles. I've played with almost all of them. Some of them I may not have owned, but I've had access to for plenty of time. And I think there might be a couple that I haven't actually played. We'll see when I'm going over the list here. But yeah. And to be quite frank, I don't think anything is going to probably get a D or an F tier. Really, I don't know. We'll see when we get talking to it. Some are definitely going to be S tiers. Some are like, pretty good. But I don't know if there's anything that's just like, man, that console sucked ass. So we'll see. But I wish these lists were in order, which they're not, of like chronological order of all the consoles. So I'm just gonna make it easy and just go down the line of what they have here. And the first one they have is the newest Xbox. I think this is Series S. I'm going to put it as a C tier because I've never touched Xbox this generation because I have a pretty high powered gaming PC, so I can play all my games on that. But as far as I know, specs wise, everything, it's comparable to the PlayStation. Nothing really, I don't know. I'm putting that in the C. I haven't really heard anybody talk about it being incredible, nor anybody really saying it's bad. C is middle of the road, average. Let me know down in the comments below if you own one and whether or not you love it, you hate it, or why not, It is what it is. And now, for whatever reason, the next console they have up is the Dreamcast, which this is one that I have played a lot of. This might actually be one of my... Well, man, it's really hard to say because there's going to be a few consoles that are going to fall into this category of there wasn't that many good games, but the games that were good were incredible. Or they're like a nostalgic in the sense of like... I don't know. I think we do have to try to rate it mostly as a grand overall scope, though. And unfortunately, that means I think the Dreamcast is going to get a D. Because this is the era of, right? This is the era of the PS2, the OG Xbox, right? I believe it's around that time. It's been a long time. I remember going to, because I played a lot more of the Saturn. That's the one that I played a lot more of. But I remember still going to Target. At this point, I was like old enough. I'd go to Target on my own. I'd like take the bus and go to Target, or not Target, Toys R Us. And they had, public playing station of every console. There's the Dreamcast to play a lot of games. Found out later that a buddy of mine that I would go to after school, go to his house quite often, maybe like 2-3 times a week. He had a Dreamcast. So we would play, a lot of games. The games that comes to mind the most for me is Crazy Taxi. But that was a really fun game. There's some decent games on there. But at the time, there just wasn't a lot of games. I feel like the Dreamcast was lacking. The controller is trash. Like, the controller itself is absolute trash. Obviously, this is Sega's last console, or at least it's the last major one that I'm aware of. It is what it is. This list also does have handhelds as well, so just to keep that in mind. And I think this is actually the Xbox One, right? The Xbox One, the previous gen. I'm still going to put it in the C anyway. I'm only saying that because I see the Series X on here. I just realized there's some duplicates on here that are like different versions of the same thing. Maybe this is the Series S. I don't know. PSP. Okay. I'm going to have a very similar thing when it comes to Nintendo. The PSP is a C. So this is handheld, obviously. I had a PSP. I bought it specifically for Crisis Core and then War of the Lions. I had a couple of the games that like a buddy of mine gave me or whatever because he got rid of his PSP. I finished through Crisis Core. Played it through twice. Played it once on normal, then played again on the harder difficulty, and then War of the Lions. Final Fantasy Tactics. I didn't like the PSP. I ended up selling it. I remember specifically meeting up with some dude at like a Jack in a Box or whatever in the middle of the night and selling it to him for like $200, and then like another like $50 for like my games or something. It was all right, It was the first. It used a different type of technology, UMD, I believe, was the weird like mini disc things, and then I remember they came out with like movies as well, so you can like watch movies on it with these weird discs. I don't know. Even then, when it came out, it felt weird because nothing else utilized that. I don't know. I don't want to say proprietary, but it utilized that specific type of hardware that nothing else used, and it was just like, I don't know. And I distinctly remember Tactics War of the Lions. If you didn't jailbreak your PSP, that thing lagged so bad. The frames was atrocious, and if anybody remembers the PS1, it ran like butter. So, I don't know. It wasn't great to me. Next is a version of the 360, because there's like 3 of them on here, I think. Or is this a... Oh, no, I think this is the PS1, or Xbox One. I can't tell, man. These pictures are too small, man. Well, I'm going to assume this picture is the Xbox One. So that's going to go here. And the only reason why I'm assuming that is because, like I said, there's duplicates on here of like different versions of the same shit. Anyway. C tier, same reason why. There's only going to be one Xbox, actually 2 Xboxes that I'm going to put above C. I already know. And one of them is getting that S tier. But next we have Game Boy Color. Come at me. Game Boy Color was S tier. I can't tell if that's Game Boy Color or a Game Boy SP. Okay, that's SP. The SP. That's also S tier. This is the one with the backlight. That's right. Because Game Boy Color's right here. I remember that now. Okay. Well, you guys already know where I'm going to put Game Boy Color, so I'm putting that S tier as well. SP is just a better Game Boy Color with better lighting. Otherwise, it's about the same, but it's foldable. Okay. The game that I remember the most that I was playing on this was Aria of Sorrow, Castlevania, and then Dawn of Sorrow came out, I believe, on the Advanced, right? Or was Dawn of Sorrow still on SP? I don't remember, but Aria of Sorrow is what I played. The one that I remember distinctly for this. Obviously, we had some Pokemon games that we would continue to play, but hell yeah, Game Boy Color. I'm actually going to put, Game Boy Color needs to be ahead because it was more revolutionary. There was just too many good games for the handheld. And this is coming from anybody who knows me, who watches like my live streams on Twitch or anything like that knows, I don't like handhelds. I just don't. But the Game Boys were old enough to back when I was like a kid that I did like them. Mainly because I could play when I was on the bus going to school. I can play when we were going on a field trip. I can play I had something to play at all of these points in time. Nowadays, if I really need something, I got my phone, right? But I had a lot of fun with the Game Boy Color. Mainly, it was Pokemon games. I'm trying to think of what else I might have played. There's probably some RPGs. Is this where we played Golden Axe? Or Golden Sun? It might have been on Game Boy Color. Because that's a great RPG too. Next looks like is the DS. This looks like Nintendo, the regular DS. I'm going to put this as a B. Some people might disagree with me here. I got a DS, not because I wanted one. My friends knew I didn't want one. Because at this point, the DS came out. I was already a senior in high school. Excuse me. And it's just not really my thing. However, there was a group of 4 of us in high school. We were like best friends all throughout freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. And to this day, the 4-man crew is like the perfect amount of players for a lot of co-op games, right? Some are 3 players, some are 5 players, but 4 was generally the way to go. And a buddy of ours, he was 17 and he was already like a shift leader at a GameStop, and he got us all discounts on used DSs. I think it was ridiculous. So we all had a DS. He got it for us. Animal Crossing was the game that we all started to play on. But of course, I got Pokemon. What was it, Diamond and Pearl or something like that? I believe those were the ones on the DS. Then what was the Zelda game? Phantom Hourglass, is that the right one? I want to say that was it. And these were good games. I think for me, I had issues with the hardware. My screens weren't that great because you utilized the top screen and the bottom screen was. The gameplay was on the top screen. The bottom screen was generally like your inventory, your map system, or things like that, which I like the concept, but I had issues with the hardware of the DS. So that's why I'm keeping it in a B. But the games that I played were all great, and I know plenty of people who had a blast with the DS. But I'm actually going to go ahead and jump around a little bit just because I'm thinking about it. I believe this is the DS Lite. I think light versions are always worse. That's just me. It's basically the same thing, but it's worse because they're generally made flimsier. I don't know. I'm keeping it right next to it. Let me know down below what you guys think if you've played on a DS Lite as well. And I think that's what that is. I could be wrong, but I know it's not the 3DS. This one gets higher. This one's an A because it's essentially a DS but better. And we're going to see something similar to that shortly. It's not much to talk about other than it's just a better DS, right? In pretty much every which way. I want to say this is the one because it's called the 3DS too. It's the one that had the depending on how you looked at it, things looked 3D. They kind of popped out of the screen, which I thought was a cool concept. And it was touchscreen because I don't think, or maybe that's what it was. It was touchscreen, but the DS wasn't. Anyways, I don't want to spend too much time on that because I don't have as much experience with it. But people might argue with me on this. The next one up is the Sega Genesis. This is top A tier. This is A+. This is I almost want to put it in S tier. So the Genesis is actually the console that I had growing up of that era. Now, I've probably played infinitely more Super Nintendo games. So when I was a child, from the ages of 6 till 11, with a few exceptions, every single Friday after school until Sunday night, I went to my grandparents' house. My grandparents had a Super Nintendo and an extra TV in the room that I stayed in. So I had access to just play 3 days straight, essentially. Every weekend. And sometimes they even let me take it home. So that's why I'm going to be able to, talk about that. But the Genesis is what we had at home. I'm looking to see if I see it on here, but I don't see it. But we also had the 32-bit. I think it was called the 32X. It was because the Genesis was 16-bit, and then the 32X made it. You stuck it in the cartridge. It was it had a thing. You stuck it in the game, and then the game went inside that, and it amplified the game, which is pretty cool. Tons of great games. One of my favorite games of all time is on there, Shining Force. I remember having Street Fighter 2 on there. Obviously that was on everything. We had Shadow of the Beast. We had a Buck Rogers game, which was kind of crazy. Shining Darkness, Shining Force 2. Definitely had some other games on there too. Doom. I remember that. That was one of the big ones that we played on the 32X because we didn't have a PC or any kind of PC at home until 1998. 98 or 99 is when we got our first home computer. But I love the Genesis. It never had any issues, literally ever. I mean, for all I know, maybe it did. I was a kid, but love the games. Phantasy Star, dude. I was trying to think in my mind the RPG series that was on this console that we played. Phantasy Star. Phantasy Star is fantastic, and one of the best ones is Genesis era. Whew. Okay. We're just going down the line. PS2 S tier. There's just no question, right? I mean, I don't think anybody can argue the PS2 not being an S tier console. It has a library that is unmatched. It is unmatched. It has one of the most iconic boot up screens. It's a DVD player, right? You know, especially back then, you got the PS2. It doubled as a DVD player. The PS1 did not do this, and pretty much everything was backwards compatible, which was fantastic. I remember there was a couple games at least that I had that were not, but for the most part, yeah, it's backwards compatible. I mean, in the PS2 era of games it's just something else, man. Like, this console was redonkulous in terms of like it's insane. There's nothing else I really need to say. This is a PS2 Slim, I believe. I'm actually gonna put it lower. I'm gonna put this in like a lower A tier because the PS2 Slim was. It's not that it was weaker, but I distinctly remember having friends complain about the fact that it overheated. So I had the original PS2, very first wave. It had issues. We sent it back to the manufacturer, I remember, and they sent it back, fixed it, and it worked until, I don't know. I don't even know where mine is. It's somewhere. It's probably my parents' house somewhere. And it's perfect. I never had a Slim, but like I said, I had a lot of friends that had the Slim, and they pretty much all complained about the fact that, yeah, it would overheat. The loading times in the games were much longer. I don't know. I think just because the hardware wasn't as strong. Controversy. Controversial pick. It's the bulletproof case. It's the bulletproof console. It is the OG Xbox. I was actually, like, up to this point, I knew I was going to put the OG Xbox kind of high. And I was like, is it A or S? Is it A or S? Is it A or S? My arguments for putting it into A tier and not S tier is because its library is not that big. It's not the greatest, you know, in terms of like, the PS2 has a gaming library that is insanely large. Because there's just so many games, there's an insane amount of games that are top-notch quality. The OG Xbox does not have that, but it does have. It's got Halo. Unfortunately, it has Halo and Halo 2, and the PS2 obviously did have PlayStation Online. Most notably, I'm thinking of like Champions of Norath and EverQuest Adventures. And Xbox had the first iteration of Xbox Live, and online and stuff. And because I had this as well, I remember receiving this. I think I got it maybe like a year after it was released. I got it for Halo, you know. But I had a bunch of other games on here. I obviously had Halo 1 and 2. I had a game called Advent Rising, which had poor reviews, but I thought it was fun. I actually had both. I think I had both. But I'm distinctly only remembering number 2 of Knights of the Old Republic on here. And I don't know why, because I had them on PC. Same thing with Morrowind. I remember having Morrowind and Oblivion. No, Oblivion's on the 360, but I had Morrowind on this one. I don't think I had an Onimusha, but I had another game. It was another weird samurai game. It started with like an O. It was like Utsuguri or something like that. It's a lot of fun, dude. Yeah, there's just so many. The games that was on Xbox were fantastic. There just wasn't a lot of games. That was its issue. But they were all top quality, man. A lot of people used to complain about the controller, and to be fair, the original controller isn't the greatest, but I didn't mind it, and a lot of people with the bigger hands did like it because it was a bulkier controller. Controversy. It's the Nintendo Wii. I'm trying to remember what game I got for the Wii. I want to say I got Brawl. What was the game? Or no, it wasn't Brawl. I had Brawl, but that wasn't why I got the Wii. We got it for Twilight Princess. Zelda Twilight Princess, which is, I think Twilight Princess is an excellent Zelda game. It is definitely in the better half of Zelda games. But this was the console that, introduced Nintendo's take on, the wireless controller, the Wii nunchuck thingies, and all of that kind of stuff, right? Wii Sports and all of that. I'm putting it in a C because, right, this was their first foray into it. It was their introduction into doing all of these things, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great stuff with this. But it didn't work quite as well as the Wii U, which is just the same damn thing but better. And you get this other controller, so you get a better controller style for when you're playing, at least I liked it, when you're playing single player games, right? It was cool playing like Zelda and you have your map on the screen, on the controller screen, but then you're still playing the game, like this. I liked it in theory. In long gaming sessions, you would start, having your neck going up and down, constantly would, maybe start getting some neck cramps, but for the most part, I think the Wii was better. It performed better. I think it had a larger catalog of games, I believe, as well with the online. And it basically had access to the exact same library as the Wii. It's just better. And it worked better. And it felt much more flawless. See, I had the Wii. I did not have the Wii U. And I remember distinctly having issues with the Wii all the time, with the sensor bars, all that kind of stuff. And I would go to my friend's house all the time, a few years later when the Wii U came out. We never had problems. Ever. And we would play for hours and hours. And you just go over. You just never had problems. Okay. Next up, we have the PS4. I think the PS4 is a solid A tier console as well. I'm going to move these around a little bit. I don't take too much stock into my rating of the A tier consoles, but I do think the PS4 is top A tier. It is a great catalog. I mean, it's the introduction of Destiny. Right, you have Destiny being introduced here, and then you have a large Bloodborne. This is where God of War 2018 was introduced to. Horizon Zero Dawn was introduced to. I mean, you have some great games on this thing. And then a lot of PS3 remasters got introduced here too, right? So I don't know. I think the PS4 is fantastic. It's just me. So the next game on this list, I am going to give. I'm going to tell you my personal rating, but then I'm going to give what I think is objectively where it belongs. The Nintendo Switch for me is a top B tier. And the reason why I would give this a top B tier is because the hardware was like a gen and a half old when it was released. This came out, the Switch came out, in between like the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and the Series X era, and came out in between. But the Switch, hardware-wise, like, it's worse than the PS4. It's worse than the Xbox One. And a lot of games just don't perform very well on it. The only games that really do are, like, in-house Nintendo games. That being said, it's an S-tier console / handheld because of the handheld aspect. The handheld aspect and the fact that there were some games that work on this thing that should not work. Monster Hunter Rise. Like, come on, man. How does this game even function on the Switch? Let alone, you know. It's like, I don't know, man. And it's got a lot of great games. There's a lot of great games on the Switch. Metroid Dread. Obviously, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are obviously fantastic. But there's just a lot of fantastic games on the Switch. Performance be damned. I know this is the Series X. I'm just putting it in the C tier. I talked about my reasoning with the Xbox. I can't tell, again, if that's a 360 or not. Alright, so this next console is a little before my time. However, I have played actually a lot of games on this console. So, earlier in the video, I talked about how I'd go visit my grandparents every Friday through Sunday when I was a kid. And even at an older age, even like, in high school, I would still go visit my grandparents and stay for a couple days or whatnot. And sometimes I would go visit my uncle instead because he lived maybe like 5 minutes away from my grandparents. He had a Super Nintendo as well, but he would a lot of the times be like, back in my day, we had the Atari. I can't tell from this picture which Atari this is, but I know it's an Atari. My uncle had an Atari. I played some games on the Atari. I remember playing Gauntlet. I remember playing Zork. I remember playing a game called Bureaucracy. I remember playing a game called Dungeon Master. There was quite a few games, and I have to say this. A lot of the games that were on here, obviously, you can't really talk about graphics or anything like that, and that's why I'm not mentioning that in any of these. Because the only time I really mentioned anything was with the Switch, right? Because it was dated when it came out. The quality of games and the ingenuity that was required, I felt like from, with these games, what it asked of the player, there's some really quality games here that I think, you just kind of like modernize them, obviously throw on, current gen graphics and whatnot. These games not only would be difficult, but I think a lot of the games would be loved just due to the way that they were. The way that makes you think, a lot of these games. Obviously, Pioneer. It was a massive, massive deal back then. Like, to this day, when I go visit my dad and stuff, and go visit my dad and my uncle, and we get together for like a dinner or something, they constantly talk about, yeah, you got the PS5 and a computer, but, we had that Atari, and we spent a lot of time on that Atari. And I don't know why I'm using an accent, because they do not have an accent whatsoever. But, and then, I visit my mom's relatives as well, and they talk about, because they had one as well. I never played with them, but everybody remembers things fondly. And like I said, my experience along with it was like, even though I'm already playing Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis games, I had a blast with what I played. Granted, yeah, not a large. Enchanter, I think, is the name of one of the other games that I played. Enchanter, Dungeon Master, Zork, Bureaucracy, and Gauntlet. Those are the ones that I remember. There might have been some others. Okay, next up, I know, is the 360. Fight me. aside from the Red Ring of Death, I think the 360. I mean, not I think it's a fact. It destroyed the PS3. Um, and I didn't even own a 360. I played a lot of 360 games though. So I had a buddy of mine, the same buddy of mine that I talked about the DS. He still worked at GameStop, but now he was a general manager at the GameStop, and he was like, "Bro, I could just let you borrow the 360 and a bunch of games." So this is how I played my first playthrough of Oblivion, my first playthrough of BioShock 1. You know, I played Borderlands. You know, I played through these games on the 360. And of course, everybody knows this is where Call of Duty just blew up. Call of Duty, this is the Call of Duty system right here. It's the 360. It had an online service thing with Xbox Live that was unparalleled, that it blew the PS3 out the water, right? You know, I'm going to talk about the PS3 once I get to it. And it definitely had some great games, but 360 is just... Okay. It's not much to really say. 360 was fantastic. Obviously, you know, we got Halo 3, man. It's the OG Game Boy. It's the brick. For me, this gets an A tier, specifically because of Pokemon. I actually do not think the OG Game Boy is that great. Specifically because very shortly after it, better versions of it come out, such as Game Boy Color. But, I mean, this is the first real handheld system that has, like, a large library of games. I want to say this is where Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is, as well. Correct me on this stuff. It's been a while. I remember having one, and the only games I had on it was Pokemon. And I loved it. I was playing it all the time, dude. I played it just nonstop. I just always played it. Took it to school, play Pokemon, 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 Pokemon. You know, always had my Game Boy. But not much later, Game Boy Color, baby. All right. This is the Sega Game Gear. No, it's not a B. I don't know. I really don't know where I want to. It's A or it's B or A. See, here's the issue. This thing was superior in every way to the Game Boys. But what? It gets a B. I'm sorry. It gets low B. I had one for a very short period of time. I was sometimes a bad kid. I would talk shit back to my parents, and I distinctly remember my dad taking it away from me and selling it. I had Sonic. I remember playing Sonic a lot. I remember distinctly some field trips playing, but I don't know. It's better than average, but there was better handhelds, such as Game Boy Advanced. That's gonna go as an A tier. It's really difficult ranking this list having handhelds and consoles, but it is what it is. Advanced is really good. Dawn of Sorrow. You had Emerald or Leaf. I mean, Leaf, Ruby, and Sapphire, or was it Emerald? I don't know. The Pokemon games, and I'm like starting to just get tired out of nowhere. It was good, and it was great. Really, there was a way you could. I remember too. I had these extra things where you can connect it to an OG Game Boy or whatever, or the SP or something, so you can transfer the Pokemon and stuff, not just GBA to GBA. The GBA also allows you to. That's right. This one you can connect to we were connecting to the GameCube. That's right. We were connecting this to the GameCube, dude. I believe it connected to the GameCube. Because I believe we used it as a controller for is this what we played Four Swords on? Or no, that Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles or something. And then we used it as the controller for the bigger games. That's what I remember. This is some kind of PSP thing. I don't know what the hell this is. I'm just gonna put it next to the other PSP. Where did I put the PSP? Right here. Okay. But let's go to the Vita. The Vita is a better version of the PSP. That's all it is. It's a better version. So it gets higher. And it has more games. I felt like the performance was a lot better. As well as utilizing the non-game stuff was also better on the Vita. I thought it was great. I thought the Vita was a pretty good handheld system. But I am kind of glad that Sony has moved away from that and now it just utilizes like the Portal. But it is what it is. What the hell is this? This looks like another Genesis. I can't tell what this is. This was like the OG Game Boy, but like slimmer. I'm going to put it below it. I remember what this is. It's basically a smaller version of the OG Game Boy. So it's still, no color. I remember not liking it. I think it was because it didn't feel right. Maybe the batteries were not as good or didn't last as long. I can't remember. But, I mean, otherwise it's the same thing. PS5. Okay. Current console generation stuff. People have things to say. I have a PS5. I love my PS5. I've played countless games on my PS5. If I'm having to rank this amongst all of these other systems, I think this is where the PS5 goes. It's like a B plus. It's like a B plus system. It's, people talk about, I'm like, yeah, but what kind of exclusives does it have? Honestly, nothing really. Everything's coming to PC. But it runs so good. Certain games I play on the PS5 over PC. But I think the argument for exclusivity of game library and the fact that the overwhelming majority of the games that are PlayStation exclusives for PS5 gen are also on PS4, I think is a valid argument. Now, maybe part of that is because of, everything happening with the pandemic and all of the other stuff that made it, so it was very difficult to get a hold of a PS5, so they knew that the majority of the market only had a PS4, and that's still the case, right? Millions of people have a PS4. Like, not even half of those, I believe, have like a PS5, maybe, I don't know. I'm just pulling numbers out of my ass, but the fact that there's less PS5s than PS4s in people's homes is a fact. But I love it. I think it's great. I think that one of the bigger things that for me that's an issue is the controller. The controller, I think, is conceptually is phenomenal. In practice, my PS4, I never went through another controller. I play my PS4 like crazy and still use the same controller from day one. I'm on controller 3 or 4 on my PS5 because buttons get stuck, drift. You know, it's like, what is happening? I don't know. All right, this is a very strange picture for the PS1. But there we go. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it. PS1 is the greatest console of all time. It is the greatest system of all time. There's another one that's very close. It's very close. And maybe on a different day, I might say it is better. But for me, the PS1 is the greatest system of all time. It has too many games. I talked about the PS2 having an insane library. Bruh. The PS1's library is nuts. It's nutty. It's absolutely insane. Yes, it can't play DVDs or anything like that, but it can play music. It can play CDs. It can be a CD player. There's just too many games on this console that people argue is like, it's the greatest game of all time. You have Metal Gear Solid. You have Final Fantasy 7, 8, 9. A little more niche. I think Legend of Dragoon is great. You have Suikoden games. Man, you have... Which one was on the PS1? Was that Breath of Fire 4? A lot of great sports games. And I'm not a sports game player. You have Gran Turismo. I believe 2 is also on the PS1. Siphon Filter, dude. Resident Evil. I mean... Silent Hill starts here, too. God, oh my god, dude. It's the GameCube. This was Nintendo's last... it was their last console that they put out. Last true console that they put out that was truly trying to compete with their competitors, the PS2 and the OG Xbox. My friends at school called me having the Triforce because I had all three. But having all three doesn't mean I think they're all the same. I do think overall the GameCube is the weaker system just because it doesn't have the library. Or not just because the Xbox is also in that category. But I think the Xbox is better. The Xbox is the most powerful system out of all three. The GameCube, I got the GameCube purely for Metroid Prime. Now, obviously, I had some other games too. Metroid Prime 2, obviously being one of them. We obviously had Smash Brothers Melee. I think I had like the first couple Mario parties on here. Some other games. Zelda 4 Swords, Wind Waker. It's obviously a fantastic game. And it's like these games are all incredible. I think it's Nintendo's best controller they've ever made. I still think it's like so many people that play Smash Brothers still love this controller. They swear by this controller. I personally have kind of like grown more fond of the Switch Pro controller than the whatever it's called exactly. I actually like it a lot, but it's still fantastic. You know, A tier is legit. Let's try to speed this up. The OG NES. It's a low B tier. You know, it didn't really have much competition, but hey, it's got some good games. SNES, second best console of all time. Super Nintendo. Super Mario World is still one of the greatest games of all time. A Link to the Past. Super Metroid. Final Fantasy 4. Final Fantasy 6. Super Mario RPG. The OG Legend of the Seven Stars. This is the PS1 with the screen. I've never played it, so it's going in F tier. Nintendo 64. I'm putting it actually right behind the GameCube. It's pretty close, actually, for me. Very, very close. I think I had more games for the 64. I remember because I got the 64 before the PlayStation. Even though the PlayStation is older. The 64 had... Mario 64 was fantastic. Banjo-Kazooie. Obviously, you have Ocarina of Time. Donkey Kong 64. These are all great games. I mean, I actually had like a game, what was it called? Wave Race 64. Like a weird, like, it was to compete with Jet Moto, which, yeah, this is like another game. Jet Moto had Jet Moto, you know, you had GoldenEye. There's so many iconic games on the 64. Even though my nostalgia is higher, that's why I still put the GameCube above it, just due to, I think, the quality of the system. All right, PS3. I think this picture is the OG PS3. It's bottom B tier. And I talked about it quite a bit. Maybe not quite a bit, but when I put the 360 up, because the 360 was its counterpart, and the 360 blew it out the water. The PS3 does have some great games, but its library is the only time that the Sony library is really this small. The only version, actually, this is going to be the only time I'm actually going to go ahead and change it. I'm going to put this higher in the B tier. I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to put it right behind the PS5. Because the original PS3 does have the backwards compatibility. It's when they start putting out the other versions. I don't know which version this is, but later versions didn't have it. So, like, the OG PS3 was much more sought after because it could play PS2 games, or at least a lot more of them than the later versions couldn't. But even then, still, its library is too small. Its online factor was pretty bad, you know. And the system, it just looks stupid. This is another 360. I'll just put it right next to the other one. I don't know the difference. It's probably, oh, this one's got the larger hard drive. Same thing. This is an Xbox One. C tier. Okay. Who remembers this? Pretty sure this is the Nintendo Virtual Game Boy. Virtual Boy. I need to look at a picture. Yep, it's the Virtual Boy. Okay. I never owned it, but I played it at Toys R Us plenty of times. It's trash. The other two on here, I can't remember. I'm just going to leave it at this because there's just too many repeats on here anyway. This is my list of systems. A lot of this is going to be bias. There's going to be so much bias for a lot of people on this due to nostalgia, what they grew up with, what they played, and everything. I was pretty fortunate in a lot of ways, and I am very thankful for the fact that I grew up in a way that, not I grew up in a way, but I grew up in like pretty privileged in the sense that I was able to play almost all these consoles. And I actually have played. I've played all of these, really. It's just a matter of how much that I play them. That's what it is. Let me know what you guys think down below. You know, where you would play some consoles. What's your favorite console of all time? Which ones do you think are trash? You know, like, subscribe. I'm going to be doing more videos of just more things. I'm going to try to keep things as much video game related as possible. I've decided, you know, that's where I want to keep my channel. But anyways, guys, thanks for watching.